I'm NIMA Rajan, and this is Forum Daily Week in Review. Some doctors say they're worried about the number of ads for Ozempic recently appearing everywhere, from sporting events to public transit across Canada. Ozempic is approved in Canada to treat type 2 diabetes, but it is sometimes prescribed off-label to treat obesity as well. The marketing campaign comes on the heels of an unofficial Ozempic promotion for weight loss by social media influencers and celebrities. Vancouver endocrinologist Dr. Ehud Ur says the aggressive advertising campaign could further drive people looking for cosmetic weight loss to pressure their doctors to prescribe them Ozempic. Dr. Ur says that the benefits often aren't worth the risks for people that don't have diabetes or obesity. Ozempic manufacturer Novo Nordisk says its marketing campaign is aimed at helping people with diabetes get the treatment that they need. Well, joining us now to give us more insight into this drug and the risks and benefits associated with it in our weekly medical segment is Dr. Abhishek Raut, Medical Director at Appletree Medical Group. Dr. Raut, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Great to be here, Nina.
So what do we know so far about Ozempic and its sister drug, Rybelsus? How is it intended to be used and its efficacy?
Right. So now both drugs are approved in Canada for the treatment of type 2 diabetes specifically. Ozempic is an injectable medication belonging to the class of GLP-1 receptor. So basically, it stimulates the release of insulin and it slows down emptying of the stomach. Rybelsus, on the other hand, very similar, but it's the oral equivalent there of the GLP-1 receptor. Now, both drugs are really intended to be done in conjunction with diet and exercise, and both drugs have had some good effectiveness when it comes to lowering our blood sugars, and in certain cases, promoting weight loss as well.
All right, Dr. Raut. Now, Novo Nordisk says its marketing campaign is aimed at treating diabetes, but this drug is also said to be prescribed off-label to treat obesity, as you highlighted. So how does this work, and what does prescribed off-label mean?
Right. So prescribing a medication off-label, it really means using a drug for a purpose that is not specifically approved by any regulatory authorities, the FDA or Health Canada. So in the case of Ozempic, even though it is approved for treating diabetes, we know we have certain healthcare providers who do prescribe it off-label, in this case, for weight loss there.
All right, Dr. Raut. Now, there are social media campaigns promoting weight loss using this drug. What are some of the broader implications of this sort of unofficial advertising to consider?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a new world out there. What we're seeing with these social media campaigns is it's definitely creating a lot of demand for the medication, but that's a problem as well, because it then leads to shortages and limited availability for people who actually need the medication for diabetes management. And of course, the broader issue here is relying on social media campaigns for medical advice can also be very risky, because it tends to sensationalize the positive aspects, but not really talk about the negative aspects of a medication.
And I want to go back to Dr. Ur's warning that the risks for people who don't have diabetes or obesity aren't worth the benefits of using this drug. So can you tell us a little bit more about these risks?
I think Dr. Ur raises a few valid concerns for sure. So Ozempic, for instance, it can be effective in managing blood sugar levels, and it has that weight loss implication, but it doesn't have zero risks. We have some common side effects like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, but the ones that we really get concerned about are things like pancreatitis or thyroid tumors or even gallstones. So therefore, when we're looking at people without diabetes who are then exposed to those risks, you really have to have a good assessment of whether those risks outweigh those benefits or not, and oftentimes they do not.
And doctors, including Dr. Ur, are expressing a lot of concern on this about this aggressive marketing campaign around Ozempic. So what is your stance when it comes to this marketing campaign?
Well, look, I think in any marketing campaign, you need to really have a balanced and responsible approach to medications. So aggressive marketing campaigns should really be critically evaluated to see what their impact is on patient care. And really what we should see is prioritization of accurate information and really evidence-based claims while really promoting patient safety.
Right, Dr. Just about a minute left here, but as you highlighted earlier, this is an evolving digital world, and it's really easy for people, especially younger generations, to be influenced online. So what is your advice for those who may consider pharmaceuticals that are maybe consistently promoted online everywhere you look by even influencers and celebrities that you trust?
Right. So, as I mentioned, there's always this sensationalization aspect for medications, but, there's this old adage that there is a pill for every ill. but there's also an ill for every pill. And that's the idea that we see now, where we're seeing pharmaceutical promotions being really prevalent. It's really essential for individuals, especially younger generations, to really look at that information critically. So my advice would be to really exercise caution on what we're seeing online, especially with influencers, and instead look for information from very reputable sources like healthcare professionals and peer-reviewed studies.
Across the country, celebrations are being held to mark National Indigenous Peoples Day, which falls on June 21st every year. It's a day to not only celebrate, but to honor the contributions of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Canada has officially marked this day since 1996 after consultations and statements of support for such a day were made by various Indigenous groups. Indigenous communities across Canada are hosting events involving sunrise ceremonies, traditional dancing, music, and food. It is an especially important day to recognize Canada's history when it comes to the treatment of Indigenous peoples, learning from the past, and working towards reconciliation, as well as having the opportunity to appreciate the beauty and history of the rich cultures of Canada's Indigenous peoples. Well, joining us now to discuss National Indigenous Peoples Day is Mr. Frank Brown, a Heiltsuk Nation hereditary chief. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Happy to be here. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
Happy to have you, sir. So what does this day mean to you?
This day means that the Native people of this land aren't invisible. By Canada recognizing our people, it means that we're starting to move to our rightful place as the first peoples of this land. So I'm happy that we're doing it.
And we mentioned National Indigenous Peoples Day was set in Canada back in 1996. So do you have any fond memories or moments that may be brought up when you think about past National Indigenous Peoples Days?
Well, probably the first one, because I think there was selective memory or selective amnesia where there wasn't any recognition of our people. And a lot of the times when our stories were shared, it was negative, confrontational, or issues of social ill. So it's nice to come into the mainstream with a positive reflection. So I'm glad that this is happening.
And on that note of a positive reflection, we are seeing such beautiful ceremonies being held across the country today. It really provides Canadians an opportunity to appreciate Indigenous culture and talent. So what would you encourage our viewers to see or learn about on this day?
I think that every day is Indigenous Day in my world, and I think it's important for other Canadians, especially new Canadians, to learn, to take time to go to the libraries or go online and learn and reflect on the first peoples of this land. It creates the depth and breadth of understanding and meaning for this great country that we all reside in.
All right, sir. Now, although this is a day to celebrate, we know Canada's dark past and its treatment of Indigenous peoples and its impact on communities to this day will always be something that we need to remember as we work towards reconciliation. So what kind of opportunities does this day provide for officials in terms of learning and improving Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples?
Well, I can't speak for anybody else, but my own lived experience. I went to the Bella Bella Indian Day School, where I'm calling from, and my parents and grandparents went to residential school. They were taken away from our communities. We're in a fly-in, boat-in only community in the middle of the Pacific Northwest coast here on the west coast of Canada. And so our collective memory as a community isn't a positive one. It was negative, and it was enacted through discriminatory legislation that was separating children from their families and Native people from their land. And so we are turning a page in this history. In order to move forward, we have to understand what happened. And it was a horrific acts of genocide. That's how it was characterized by Truth and Reconciliation. The body of work that was done that catalyzed Indigenous Peoples Day to reflect on this horrific history so that we can never forget and that we can move forward in a good way as the body politic.
All right, Mr. Brown, just a quick 30 seconds left here, but if you could leave us with maybe one message on this National Indigenous Peoples Day, what would it be?
I think we've got some really pressing issues in society today on the West Coast. We're dealing with atmospheric rivers, decline of salmon, and I think people have to listen to the Indigenous place-based people. We have something to offer around how we're going to navigate this great uncertainty that the human family is dealing with around climate change and biodiversity loss.
All right, we'll be right back on Forum Daily Week in Review. An annual dog meat eating festival held in Yulin, China, is sparking outrage from animal rights activists around the world. The Yulin Dog Meat Festival is held every June to celebrate the summer solstice, which falls on the 21st, in what many may consider a tradition spanning over a decade. However, according to Dr. Peter Lee, China policy specialist for Humane Society International, this festival was created by Yulin's dog meat traders. He also points to studies conducted in Yulin, which disproved claims that dog meat is a regular source of protein for rural people or is a household food in China. So is this controversial tradition fabricated? Joining us now to talk more on this is Dr. Peter Lee himself. Dr. Lee, welcome to Forum Daily.
Good to be here.
So as we mentioned, this controversial festival has long been thought to be a cultural tradition, and those who are in favor of it often say, what's the difference between a chicken's life and a dog's life? But it's interesting that you point to research that highlights that dog meat or cat meat is not a traditional part of Chinese diets. So can you tell our viewers a little bit more about this? What are the facts when it comes to this?
Morally, dogs and pigs and cattle are the same. There is no difference morally. However, and sadly, pork and chicken are household food, traditional food in China, but dog meat is not household food. I'll give you 3 examples to support this, argument. First, majority of the Chinese people do not eat dog meat. Second, if you go to an average Chinese family, you open the refrigerator, you are absolutely not likely to see dog meat in the refrigerator. And thirdly, the National Consumption Survey in China conducted in 2016, and also recently a consumption survey in Yulin confirmed that dog meat is not a household food of the Chinese people.
Thanks for clearing that up, Doctor. Now, the Humane Society International recently released a study on this. It found that less than 20% of the people in Yulin opposed a dog and cat meat ban. In fact, 70% said it wouldn't have a significant impact on their lives. So considering this information, what is preventing a full-out ban from being implemented at the Yulin Dog Festival?
Yes, dog meat consumption is limited to a very small number of people. But why the obstacle to outlawing this trait? I would say local authorities lack the political determination to outlaw it because they are concerned about employment, about livelihood of the small number of dog meat traders. So these people, small number of dog meat traders in Yulin and across the country, in my opinion, have hijacked China's, policy making regarding dog meat trade. So it is lack of political determination for the authorities to do it.
A little over 2 minutes left here, Doctor. I really want to get into what's happening at this festival. Now, some are pointing to torture being involved in the killing of dogs and cats. So what do we know so far about the methods used to kill dogs for their meat? Are they at least being killed ethically?
Well, not trying to defend China's dog meat traders, torture is not an industry practice, but torture happens on an individual level, by animal abusers. But killing dogs for food in China, in Yulin, is the most brutal, practice because all these dogs, watch other dogs being killed in front of them, which is the most, unbelievable, practice and beyond this cruelty, beyond the description.
Definitely very cruel practices right there, sir. Now, other reports are pointing to stolen pets in addition to stray dogs and cats that are being taken for slaughter. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? And what are some of the legal stipulations of this in China, stealing someone's pet for meat?
Yeah, China has no dog farms, raising dogs for the meat trade. So a lot of the dogs for the market are stolen pets. And in fact, China's dog meat trade has been sustained by a series of activities violating China's own laws, like property protection law and animal disease control and prevention law, because the dogs are shipped across provincial boundaries without proper documents and papers. And of course, sick and dying dogs are slaughtered for food in clear violation of China's food safety legislation.
All right, doctor, a quick 30 seconds left here, but people watching this, a lot of them might want to help, maybe by fostering or adopting a rescued dog from the festival, funding rescue charities, or even going to China and volunteering themselves. So what is your advice to these individuals?
Humane Society International has been leading a global campaign against dog meat trade in Asia and across the world. We have partner groups in China, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, and of course, South Korea to end the dog meat trade. So if people want to, support us, follow Humane Society International for the latest campaign and progress.
Canadians appear to be struggling to save for retirement, with many citing inflation and higher interest rates as the reasons that they need to delay the next phase of their lives. A new survey from the Healthcare of Ontario Pension Plan, conducted by Abacus Data, found that 44% of non-retired Canadians aged 55 to 64 have less than $5,000 in savings. And 1 in 5 from that group said they haven't set anything aside for retirement at all. Young Canadians aged 18 to 34 also reported struggling to plan for the future, with half admitting that they are living beyond their means. Abacus Data CEO David Coletto says that in the 5 years of conducting the survey, around 70% of respondents have consistently agreed that Canada is heading for a retirement crisis. Well, joining us now to give us more insight into this is Mr. Bruce Youngblood, certified financial planner with PensionSolutionsCanada.com. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Good morning, NIMA. Good afternoon.
So the survey points to inflation and higher interest rates as the main contributing factors impacting retirement savings, or at least according to these respondents here. So do you agree with this, Mr. Youngblood?
I do not agree. I think the term itself, savings, is the part that's missing. If people are arriving at mid-60s and they have very little money, they obviously haven't been putting it aside. So, whether there's inflation or not inflation, and I don't mean to sound trite, but saving starts with, putting money aside.
All right, sir. Now, what would you say are other contributing factors that may be affecting retirement savings other than inflation and high interest rates?
Well, in the press, we constantly read about the high debt of Canadians. If I'm not mistaken, it's over 100% of income on average. So if you're servicing debt, you're likely not putting money aside. So debt and, high interest rates, that's true, although 19% is not something impacted by inflation. So once again, you have to put the money aside for it to grow and be impacted by any inflation.
And another thing to consider here is a retirement age, which is also something that we're seeing concern around the growing retirement age, especially in France. We saw a lot of pushback to President Emmanuel Macron's retirement reform. So how is this increasing life expectancy contributing to the issue of retirement savings?
Well, clearly it's a problem. If you put money in your piggy bank until you're age 65 and your dad, maybe died at age 80 or 85, then you know how fast you can draw it out of the piggy bank. But if you're going to live to 105, you're going to run out of money. And what Monsieur le Président Macron did was increased by 2 years. I think Canadians, if I may misunderstand this, this is actually a pension plan much more closely aligned to something like, let's say you work for the government of Canada, and from age 28, you know that, gee, at age 63, I'm going to retire and I'm going to get full pension, et cetera. So this is a pension in France that retards your retirement date from work by 2 years. So it is much more than just the way our government attempted to increase the OAS. This is not a small part of the income of a French citizen. This is 100% of the income of those pensioners.
All right, Mr. Youngblood, a little over a minute left here, but according to the survey, a lot of Canadians think we're heading for a retirement crisis. So what is your stance on this? Are we heading towards a retirement crisis? And if so, what could it look like for Canadians?
Well, very likely we are already in a crisis because of the aforementioned lack of savings and high interest. How to resolve that? I would say that the government of Canada should institute higher CPP. Right now, a working Canadian can collect up to $30,000 if they've worked forever, contributed to the max and wait to age 70. So why not pay more, force us all to pay more, and then at age 70 we collect let's say $50,000. That's a much more livable wage.
All right, just 45 seconds left here, but are there any supports out there right now or any realistic steps that Canadians can take right now to better their retirement situation in the future, sir? Any advice for our viewers?
Well, the age-old advice is spend less than you make. And to add to that, the intelligentsia would say save 10% of whatever you make. So whether you're 25 or 55, like you've got to put the money aside. Save 10%, spend less than you make.
Spend less than you make. All right, sir. Thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily and giving us your advice. Thank you.
My pleasure, NIMA. Thank you.
All right, I'm NIMA RAJAN, and that'll do it for your look at important conversations from this past week. Remember, for more news on demand, you can always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and follow us on our social media handles for updates. That's all for Forum Daily Week in Review. Have a great weekend, Canada. See you next time.